Do trade shows work? Should we go? Should we exhibit? Or should we host them? Recently, I was just at an event, and these were the big questions. Where do trade shows fall? Should they be part of their marketing? Today, my guest, Kristi Dougherty, who is the founder of Reach Consultancy, is going to help us answer those questions because she is involved in events. She goes to them, she puts them on, she sets them up for her clients. So she's going to be the perfect person to help us out with this. But before we get started, my name is Donna Peterson, and you are listening to the B2B Marketing Excellence podcast. I go all around the world talking with marketing leaders, business owners in the industrial space, trying to find out what is working, what is not, and what are the new trends for the future. So today we are going to talk to Kristi. Good morning, Kristi. How are you?
I'm fine, Donna. How are you?
Good. Like I said, I am so excited to be talking to you because I just returned home from a trade show. And the big discussion was, where do trade shows fall? Should they go? And after my trip home yesterday, which was relentless between delayed flights to missing connections, being put on standby, I really had to sit and reassess the situation of, are they really worth it or not?
That's fair. That's fair.
But I still say yes.
Yes,
So
I do too. I do too.
now, before we jump into the events aspect, I just had to pick your brains because I know you have extensive knowledge in brands, revenue management, audience growth. And I wanted to tell you what you think are some of the most significant things we need to be doing to grow our audience.
Honestly, I think everyone is really concerned right now. We're back in that trend of getting off platforms and getting back into first-party data.
Yes.
And events are a very good way to do that, which we'll get into. But yes, I think that what I'm hearing and working with a lot, excuse me, with my clients is that first-party data focus and how can we get people to interact with us directly to reduce our reliance on other channels. It's great. And social media is amazing. It's a great tool for a lot of my events, but we're not necessarily relying on it. We are getting ticket sales from it, but it's more of a branding issue and really keeping the brand top of mind when we want them to engage and we need them to fill out that form for the event. So first party data for sure needs to be a huge part of your audience strategy now. What are the ways you can get people working directly with you? And then just the generation of content and making sure that you always have fresh content coming out, that people can constantly know they can come to you for that engagement on their, whether it's for their career, their industry, whatever it is they need. Just thinking we'll just produce the same old content and then just get more excited at the events, not great.
Yeah. And I always stress to the clients, when you're doing content, make it educational,
Yes.
create value, make sure that content has some good value because that's what's going to keep them coming back for more.
Yes. Yep, exactly.
And so that's very good. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people saying that about first party data. I'm a strong promoter of that first party data because you don't know when, like social media, when they might change those logarithms. Look what happened with Twitter turning into X. And
Yes.
the audience change and the different posts that are put out there. It really changed. And I've heard of people, we used to spend all this time and energy on it, and now they don't do anything
I
on
know
it.
many media brands, and we won't get into all the kind of permutations of X, whatever it's called, but a lot of media brands dropped X because of the assumptions of poor journalism and their media and magazines, and they didn't want to be associated with that. So if that was a place where you had thousands of followers, you had to readjust and say, are we strong enough that they're just going to come follow us on our other channels? Are they already there anyway? And it's okay. How do we make sure we've got them? Again, you're worrying about that third party platform again. Why not see if we can get them to sign up for newsletters, come to our events, attend our webinars? That's all people filling out forms to directly interact with you. And that's what we want.
Yeah, especially if you get them on your own list and you can really start to know them, adding more fields to their records, knowing what they're engaging with. That's when you can send them promotions that speak directly to them and you'll get a better response.
Yes. And personalization, I didn't even mention it because to me it's a no-brainer, but I know a lot of people still, if they have some issues with their list, and that happens, you may have inherited a list or built a
Uh-huh.
list over time that isn't, maybe it's not as clean as it could be. So you're hesitant to use first names or other kinds of
Mhm.
personalizations. I get that. Just get your list cleaned up.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, personalizing and connecting with them, not just by throwing a first name into an email, but by really knowing who they are, what their pain points are. Again, that's another way events are helpful because you've got speakers in the industry, you've got vendors that know what's going on out there. They're in the trenches every day, and they're going to tell you what's going on and let you know how to connect and have the right sort of content to help these people do their jobs better.
And I love you saying that because you have that, everyone's saying, oh, you've got to personalize, you got to personalize, but you're right. Make sure you know that your data is good because it really backfires very quickly.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
you are calling me Paul.
Yes. And that has happened. That has
Oh,
happened to
I
me.
know. I've gotten
Yeah.
them. I don't want to even tell you some of the names I've been called over the years.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's data all day long. And there's so many great providers out there that can help you get things
Yes.
clean and get things right. And then really focusing on getting them into those direct channels so that you're not relying on other platforms. And then just making it really understanding your audience and making it personal, understanding these are their jobs that they're dealing with day in and day out. And you need to understand what they're going through. You can't just have the same old thing going on in your magazine or your newsletter or at your event. They're going to stop coming. They're going to stop reading.
I almost feel like you were sitting in the room this week when I was speaking because one of my slides was on building relationships, how you need to build relationships. And there were four bullets. It was first, clean up your list. Make sure you've got a nice, clean database.
Yes.
The second was to know and understand your audience. 3 was create good, valuable content. And 4 was humanizing your brand because I was speaking
Yeah.
to an industrial audience, but you just hit on all 3 at the top.
And that's the challenge is that these topics are not groundbreaking. They
No.
have been around for a while, but I think a lot of teams are very lean now. They're so
Yes.
focused on the day to day. I've got to get this out. I've got to get this out. I've got to get this out. I think a lot of people have great intentions and they might be doing an okay job with it. It's hard to push yourself to that next level of excellence sometimes and just making sure that we're not sending something out unless it's right or unless it's relevant. Why are we working on this webinar if it's not getting any attendees? Let's shift our energy somewhere else. This is sometimes hard for media companies that have been doing things for a while, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
legacy baggage, and they feel like any company really, you don't have to be a media company to be putting on an event. And if you're like, we've always done this event for these CEOs, and gosh, they fewer and fewer come every year. Look at that. Don't just keep doing it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real hesitancy sometimes to go for these best practices. They've heard it a million times. They've heard about it at events that they've gone to learn from, and yet it still isn't always happening. So that's the challenge. Yeah.
Well, you hear it all the time. This is the way
Yeah.
we've always done it. It doesn't matter if that's the way because time has changed. It's changed. The
Yes.
way we do marketing has changed. You always used to be those big, huge blasts. Like you said, these big batches
Mhm.
out there, you would get enough sales and leads that you need, but you can't do that anymore with hopes
Yeah.
that you're going to get those leads and sales.
And not to get really, I don't want to get too into the philosophical area, but I think that everything's cyclical and it's hard to keep up with the pace of technology.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up with your own Facebook account sometimes or
Yes.
your LinkedIn account. And I think people get overwhelmed. And I think we're cycling back now to that era of, I really want a personal connection. We're seeing people using direct mail again to great effect
Yes.
because people are getting mail now and they're like, oh, this is great. And there's some challenges there because not everybody's at the office now. So that's another thing of knowing your data and figuring out how to reach these people. But we're seeing some of those old school methods come out, and phone to phone has always been big in sales. You tell salespeople they've got to get on the phone. A lot of younger people, I work with a lot of younger salespeople, they're uncomfortable making those phone calls. They're used to
Yes.
texting, and so you have to coach them through. This has always been a big part of sales, but it really is now because people are really looking for those relationship-based transactions with people they trust There's so much noise. There's so many people hitting their inbox. They can't even wade through all their social messages. They can't even keep up with it. Oh, guess what? There's a new platform that we think we might use in our office now. Oh my God. So it's so hard to keep up with everything. Just knowing that someone was calling to remind you about this event and you're like, oh yeah, I really wanted to go to that. That's the best part. Or you get that postcard that's got the cute dog on it or something for like a pet food event. And you're like, oh God, I love those guys. I really want to go to that. So it's really making a difference. But I'm sure in 3 years, we might be having another digital conversation where nobody wants mail anymore. We'll see.
Yeah, you're right. It always goes around, it goes in cycles. But I agree with this group I was with this week. They have very lean marketing teams, like you said. And if you do put it out there, oh my goodness, I've got to be on all the social media platforms. I got to do all this. And I like to say, you know what? Pick one and be great at it. Once you're great at that, then move on, because there's no point being out there on everything and being mediocre.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yep.
Good. That was great. Now I want to jump into your events knowledge.
Okay.
So why do you believe in-person events are valuable for companies, particularly in this digital age? Like we just talked about how the younger generation doesn't like to call and they would prefer to do everything online. What do you think the benefits are when you go to in-person versus virtual?
Yeah, just to make that point again, events are your first party data goldmine.
Yes.
These people are voluntarily coming to you after you've marketed to them or their alumni, and they are filling out a form. They are giving you data directly to come to your event. So
self-reported information, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So this is just another tool in your first party data toolbox as you move forward. If you're over relying on some third party platforms, events can be a great way to get even more data about your audience. If you're following up with surveys, pre-event and post-event, asking questions, maybe getting more demographic answers instead of hitting them with it all at once when they're registering, even more first party data and information. So I'm a big believer in that. I also think that if I had to put it into a formula, so if everybody wants to like jot this down.
Oh, hold on a minute, getting my pen.
The formula that I go over with my clients a lot is that you want authentic connections in an immersive first person, in-person experience, because those are then going to equal serendipitous encounters between attendees and vendors, between attendees and speakers. You're going to also get brand recognition for your vendors, for the speakers who probably have personal brands, or perhaps they're speaking from a company, and your own personal brand as the host. They're going to start trusting you as the host of this event to be a thought leader, hey, they really understand what's going on in the industry. I love going to their events. And then, of course, that third piece of that kind of answer in the equation is education. The more you educate your attendees and encourage them to bring teams, encourage them to bring their rising stars, these younger people in their organizations, you're actually keeping your industry going, because you're keeping people educated, able to keep their businesses going, able to earn revenue that they can then turn around and give to you to come to your event, to read your magazine, to come to other special workshops, whatever it is that your products are. You're helping them do their jobs better. They're relying on you for that information, and that younger generation coming up through their ranks understands that you're the resource to use. It's a very cyclical equation. It really is.
And that makes so much sense, because last year I was at Fab Tech, which is a very industrial show, and they had a breakfast in the morning, and it was women in Fab Tech. And it was just nice. They segmented off, but then you got to hear these stories of people of how they got into this area, how they became a welder, when one person really went to school to be a chef and she ended up a welder, and she loves what she does. But this is what you get when you go to these trade shows. You start to talk to other people, you hear different stories. It gets you excited about your industry, but it also educates you.
And you make those personal connections too. People make lifelong industry friendships, not just peer relationships, at events like this. If they see each other year after year, they start calling each other. Some of my longest connections I actually met at events. that months later we were calling each other to say, hey, I tried this thing. Are you guys doing that? What do you think? And it would just turn into these personal conversations. And it's really how you build that peer group and a friend group within your industry that you can,
Yeah.
it's another point of reliance, and it's another point of longevity and of going through that industry together and becoming managers and becoming C-suites and bringing people up behind you and just keeping that going.
Yeah, some of my closest friends have been people whose booths were right next to
Yes.
ours, because you always had those shows, like it would be busy and then
Yeah.
it would be dead. So what do? You talk
Yeah.
to each other
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
just build these relationships that last for years. Matter of fact, last week I had lunch or dinner really with someone who I've known for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And she even said, she goes, we picked up where we left off.
Yeah.
Because there's such a deep foundation there of our relationship that there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to make the point that the education and being a resource and all of those things are great at virtual events too. I don't want to be a
Mhm.
virtual event hater. I have a
Oh,
client
no.
who
Yeah.
has an amazing virtual event. Virtual events are very specific to the audience. In this client's case, their audience can't travel. They're in government agencies. They're in very high tech, high security science agencies where actually going and mingling is discouraged because of the security aspect. They have very small budgets for travel and education. And to actually go to an event a couple hours a day for this full week, you're
Yeah.
not losing much time out of your job. You're not mingling and having some security issues. You might not have even have been able to go if it was in person because of your budget. That's so specific to that audience that they're like, why would we move into in-person with the higher costs? Because this
that
works
would
for
make
our
sense.
audience. So I want to throw that out, because if anybody's watching this and they're like, this is great, but we just do virtual or we just do webinars.
Yeah.
Those webinars are still events, by the way. Those
Yes.
are absolutely valid as events. And if they work for your audience and you're getting the engagement and the info and the first party data you need from those, and your sponsors are happy, fantastic. But the genuine connections and the serendipitous encounters just don't happen at those virtual events because they're so much more structured. And you log in now to see this. Okay, now log
Yeah.
out and come back at 1 o'clock for the next thing. You're in between, you're not sitting with someone having coffee and going, oh, you work there too?
Yeah.
Oh, I worked there back in so and so. What do you think about this? That's not happening.
No.
Those
But
platforms,
I
they've
never
tried to
understood.
find a way, but they can't do it.
But I always wondered why in marketing we have to say it's dead. This is the way, and I agree with you. I don't think anything is dead. And I think virtual events do work. I'm not going to say no virtual events. You have to do only in person. No, what I'm just saying is make sure you keep the door open.
Yes. Yeah.
And you still go and you think about hosting events or exhibiting at events.
Yeah. Oh, I think you have to have the
Yeah.
mix. That's so specific. That example I gave is so specific.
Yeah.
And I think there's very specific audiences like that. The majority of us don't have that audience. We have
that would make
much
sense.
wider audiences that do have travel budgets, that do want to invest in their people for in-person education. So yeah, I think a mix of it is great. And if you're a vendor going to these things, don't poo virtual events, especially if they're going to let you speak, because that's a great platform for your brand. And then absolutely keep going to the trade shows and the exhibitions and the smaller conferences, thought leadership type conferences, because you need to be seen as a thought leader too, as a vendor.
Right. I totally agree. Now, I've talked to a lot of event organizers, and what I'm hearing is since COVID and everything, I'm hearing that more upper management is attending shows than they ever did before. And companies are bringing entire teams because they're coinciding trade shows with their sales meetings. Because now everyone's working out remotely. They don't get a chance to have those sales meetings. So they're combining everything into one place. Have you heard that also?
Oh, I've seen it at least two of my clients. A third of our attendees are C-suite. And we do encourage them to bring teams, not only for our financial benefit with all the tickets, but it is a great way to say, so many people are remote now. This is a great way to bring your team together once a year. We can even help you. We can work with our venue to facilitate extra meeting rooms. If you can come in a day early and have your meetings in those rooms and kind of prep for the event and get ready. People love that. They love that because they're not having to fly them maybe all over 2 or 3 times a year.
Second time or anything.
We're
It's
all
all
just
one
going
time.
to meet at the X event. We're going to spend the first day and a half having dinner and having fun
Mhm.
together and talking through all of our plans for the year. And then we're going to go into this event and see how all this education aligns with our goals. And
Nice.
people are loving it. They're really loving that option. So if you're working, whether you're hosting at a hotel or you're at a convention center, those places always have extra meeting rooms, and
Yes.
they'd love for you to pay for them. But you can make that part of, you can say, hey, we offer this service where you can have a meeting room, and we're only going to charge you like $50 a head or something. Just let them know it's an extra fee, but then you're offsetting what you're paying for that extra room. And it's
Yeah.
such great customer service and such a great touch point with your audience.
Yeah, that is a great point. Because this week people were saying we can't get people to meet us anymore. We can't get sales calls. No one wants to meet us anymore. They're too busy. And I'm saying find a big trade show and set up the meetings there. The people are
Yes.
already out of the office. What is it to go across the hallway, grab a cup of coffee and talk to you for
Exactly.
15 minutes? They're more apt to say yes if they're right
Yeah.
there than
You're going to be there anyway.
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And so I do think a couple tips there is, it used to be the rule was, and it varies, but that people would often not share the attendee list with their sponsors until much closer to the show, because they wanted to show a big number and make sure they weren't like, oh, there's only this many people. You
Yeah.
just have to coach and educate your sponsors that we're going to actually provide you the list starting maybe 3 months out or 4 months
Mhm.
out. Even though we know we're getting a lot more registrations after that, we'll
Right.
just keep providing that to you every other week or whatever your time frame is, because then they can start planning all their meetings. You're making them a collaborative partner. You
Yeah.
can say, hey, they can say, hey, we were really hoping these people are coming. They're a hot lead of ours. And you can say, great, why don't I give you a code that you can send them so
Yeah.
that maybe they can come and meet with you. So
Because maybe they
turning
weren't
your
thinking
sponsors
about
into
going.
partners is better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because maybe they weren't even thinking about going to that show, but
exactly.
now they're like, okay, you're there. We can talk about our year plan with you.
Yeah.
We can just get so many things done at once. It behooves them to go.
Exactly. So I think I like to see people really making that move to being more collaborative with their sponsors and vendors and making them part of the process, because it benefits everybody. And a lot of people are doing that now. And having more C-suites and more teams coming is a target-rich environment for your vendors and sponsors. So if that's happening and you're seeing those trends in your show, you have to let your sponsors know, because that's a huge selling point for your event.
It
The
is because,
decision makers are in the room.
and it used to be you go to trade shows and then you'd have to sit 3, 6 year, 3 years later before you saw the sale. But now that you have so many of the C-suite right there, all the decision makers are there to talk
Yeah.
amongst themselves. I'm seeing decisions are made faster too. And sometimes they're
Yes,
made right there on the floor.
absolutely. I have worked at 2 different conferences where we were approached at our office and asked if there was a private room they could use because they wanted to do a contract.
Wow.
So we were like, yes, let us help you. You can use our office if you like. Like, we were just, you want to facilitate that.
That's where you say yes, but please remember next year, this is where this contract went down.
Exactly. No, yeah, I think you have to really, and not that it was a contentious relationship by any means, but I think they were very siloed. Like,
Yeah.
sales is selling all the booths or all the sponsors that are coming
Yes.
to this conference, and marketing's doing this, and with the attendees, and then this person's over here managing the speakers, and it's like, it really needs to every person needs to know what's going on in it, because there's
Yeah.
so many opportunities. You could have a sponsor who's doing something really exciting with their product and would be a great speaker or a great demo, or a person that could collaborate with you on your agenda of, yeah, people aren't really worried about that anymore. They're actually asking us about this. You
Yeah.
want that kind of collaboration.
I think now I like to tell people just give out information. And just like these trade shows, it's not about just selling a booth.
Yeah.
It's about the whole experience and about truly caring about your attendees and your exhibitors and helping them get the most out of it. And that's when you start thinking about these side things. I think that's wonderful. Having these extra rooms where people could go in, write up a contract is always a good
Yeah.
one, but
And
just have team
often,
meetings.
especially if you're working with a hotel, often
Yeah.
you can make those free. You can just say, you know what, if you do that, if you can throw in these 2 rooms, we'll actually do this other thing. And it's
Yeah.
going to work out. The dollars are going to work out because of the goodwill that you're
Yeah.
creating. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So what key factors should companies anticipate and prepare for when organizing an in-person event, considering all aspects? You have venues and times and costs and everything.
Yeah. I think the number one, let's talk about just launching.
Okay.
Because people who are already doing events have a sense of how all this kind of works together. But if you're launching an event, the budget can be shocking. You may say, we've set aside, let's say $100,000. We think $100,000 is plenty. We're not really paying for fancy speakers or anything, but we're going to have it. We want this place and we want this date, and that's when it's going to happen. And I'm like, have you called them? Have you, it's not meant to make fun of, it's just people have a vision. They're like, this event's going to be great. We had this great idea. We think it's going to bring people together. And my number one question to clients is, do your attendees want this event?
Yeah.
Because you may think it's a great idea, or maybe a sponsor, potential sponsor came to you and was like, we've been thinking about this, but that could be very specific to their product or their service. Are you going to be able to get enough people here consistently to have a successful event for everyone, that the sponsors are happy, you have a profitable event, the attendees are happy, they have a better relationship with you? And it's surprising how often I've talked through the idea with the clients and they decide that they want to do a webinar series instead.
Oh,
Or
interesting.
they're going to do a special supplement just around this sponsor that was so jazzed about having this whole separate executive retreat at this really expensive resort in Mexico.
Yeah. Well, plus, if you do that, you do the webinar and that takes off, then maybe you do the whole big show thing. You just test the waters out. You do all your research to make sure that it will be a success.
Yeah.
And
And so
helpful
it's,
to everyone.
I really try to, I'm as excited as they are. I really want them to have a success. So I don't mean or try to be condescending about that at all, but I think it's the very first question you should ask yourself. Why are we doing this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they
Yeah.
really want it? Is there
Yeah.
really a gap in the market? Because we're back in that fun area of like maybe the early to mid 2000s of to 2010. There's a ton of events going on right now in all kinds of industries, from just executive retreats to 300-person multi-track events to expos and convention centers.
Yeah.
And people are being asked to go to a lot of events and they have to decide where they're going to spend their budget.
Yeah.
How many people can, and these people are out of the office. They're not necessarily working. If they're going to 5 events a year, I have to pick and choose, and sponsors are having that same challenge. There's a lot of really interesting and good events going on in all kinds of different spaces, not just media. And how many booths can I have? How many? And some
it's
are very
expensive too. Those booths add up, from the carpet to the garbage pail. It's
the travel, your employee meal, all those things. I think people need to really think about, is this an exciting enough idea in a crowded space that we can pull this off? Now, if you're in an industry where somehow you're going to be the only event, kudos to you. Launch that sucker.
What industry is that?
But odds are, maybe you've gone to other conferences in your industry and you're like, God, I hate the way they do this. Or I really like what they do with that, but the rest of it's just okay. Call all those ideas together with your team and all the different events you go to and go, can we create a better event that's different enough that people are going to want to come, that sponsors are going to want to support, that can really take off and eventually be a really profitable thing that can also lead to other things that we can lead them into, our magazine, our newsletter, our other things that they can pay us for. So
and
that's
when I sit down with clients and they're talking about any type of marketing initiative, the first thing you have to do is remind yourself, what are our objectives? What are our goals? And will, whatever it might be, AI tools, whatever our shows, does that fuel our mission and our goal? Yes. Because otherwise you hear somebody else did a trade show, you can't just jump on that bandwagon. Oh, they did a trade show, I've got to do a trade show. And
I think the good news is that I read an article recently that was, are events peaking? And I think in some ways they are. I think in some industries they definitely are. And I think we'll start to see some contracting of perhaps other companies buying competitor events, maybe smaller shows closing. But to the smaller show point, just like the more personal relationships, just like how we love getting mail now instead of getting an email, smaller shows are becoming hotter and hotter. Now, if you have a massive expo for an industry like pet food or computer tech or whatever it is, those aren't going to go away. Those are
Right.
massive hubs of industry and meetings and education for these massive industries. But especially in the media world, we're seeing more and more small shows where it's more affordable to come. Maybe they're more regional. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
series of regions, so you can pick which one's closest to you. And there may be 100 people.
Yeah. And especially I'm seeing a lot, and the one I was at was very industry specific.
Yes.
And what was great about that is there was workouts, breakout sessions in between where they got to get together and collaborate. So now you're talking to other individuals who are in the similar space about what's working and what's not. And those I see are being the types of shows you're going to see more of. And
I
I
agree.
think they're going to start adding on like boot camps so that
Yes.
whatever you've learned, you then go and implement it.
Yes.
Because the biggest thing, and I'm sure you've done it too, you're like me, we go to trade shows, we write notes and everything, we tell the team this is what we're doing, but then everyday life steps in and we don't get it done.
Yeah, I still have a big folder here from Social Media Marketing World that I was just at in February. I will get to it.
But wouldn't you have loved it if they said, okay, the next day you're here, you've got to do this.
Work on your accounts and do the things we talked about. Yeah, that would have been great. That's a great idea. And I do know another trend that we're seeing is that in any industry, there are vendors that are now saying, especially SaaS, these people are using our software. Why don't, instead of doing these trainings, all these individual trainings, why don't we do a thing that's like you're saying?
Yeah.
The next day, we'll go through all of our tools, what's new, we'll give some trainings, you can meet with your account reps. And maybe the first day, we'll talk about some industry trends or some, and that's happening in any industry, media, anywhere that there's software as a service. And what happens then is that if you're a person in that industry, like a metal fabrication magazine,
Yes.
who's had this conference forever, and you're like, they've signed up for years. Why aren't they coming? Oh my gosh, they're having their own show.
Yeah.
And so you have to start thinking about that. Like, it is competitive. It's very specific to people who are using their platform. So it may not totally devastate your numbers, but you may have lost a sponsor. How can I work with them? Could they maybe showcase that at my event? Could that be the
Right.
first 2 days of my event? And then we go into, there's different ways you can do that. But that is a trend that has really picked up over the last couple of years as SaaS vendors are like, well, why wouldn't I do my own event?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I do my own magazine? There's a couple that have that.
Yeah, and that's so important because if people aren't, especially for if they're not using the platform to its full potential, eventually they could get tired of it and say, oh, you know what does this one do? But if
Right.
you've sat there and you've given them hands-on help in getting all set up, you're utilizing all the features to the best of its capabilities, then you're going to stay with them.
Yeah. And your boss may find that more appealing to pay for to send you to,
Yes.
because then you're going to come back and actually be using that.
Yeah, we're paying that much for a platform. Like we're on HubSpot, not an inexpensive platform.
No, it's not.
And that's why I hope all my clients, if you're on it, you're using it to its full potential. Otherwise, why are you spending that money?
Exactly. That is a trend I'm seeing, a trend towards smaller events
Yep.
that are very niche topic specific. A lot more executive retreats seem to be popping up. Again, the big expos are here to stay. I don't see those going away because they're so helpful to those massive industries that they serve. And then we're seeing that trend of SaaS companies saying, why don't I do my own event? And maybe it's complementary to yours and maybe it's not. Maybe that
Right.
attendee decided to come to mine instead. So that's just something to keep an eye on for sure.
Are you seeing companies maybe saying, let's have an event for all our customers, but then have vendors there or speakers there, which are value added?
Yes.
You've seen that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a great way just to reinforce that you truly care about your customer's business and you're going to do everything possible to help them succeed.
And the HubSpot conference is a lot like that, I believe. I'm not sure about the other vendors, but they have a lot of education type things around it as well, not just about their platform. So yeah, that is definitely something that those people are doing.
Yeah, that one is just, I've gone for many years, but it's just too broad for my specific niche. That's why
Right.
these industry specific events are definitely more our wheelhouse as a company, but it's always great for us to be with our customers and different media sources we work for.
Yeah, that's the other cycle that's funny to me. I can remember 2000 teens. It was like, oh, niche is the way. And I worked for niche media events at that time with Carl Landau, and we had massive audiences, and it was fantastic. And then for about 5 years, it was, oh, but all these cool digital things are going on, and we're going to go do all this stuff, and we need a broader audience. And then the last 2 years, all these articles are popping up from the billion newsletters I get of, you really want to focus on a niche topic. And I'm like, really?
You know
Because
what? It's just life.
I've never
Everything
left it.
goes back. It's like bell
Yeah.
bottoms, if you want to call
Yeah.
them bell bottoms. Like it is bell bottoms. Oh no, they're out of style. You've got to go straight leg. Then all of a sudden you start one boot cut, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it
No,
comes back.
it's just funny to me because I think that the broad companies of the world, when I think of really broad companies, even outside of media, the
Yeah.
Coca-Colas of the world are probably not super concerned with any niche except geographical ones, because the
Mhm.
Coke marketing will obviously vary by country and language,
Yes,
but it's still Coke.
that's right.
It's still
Right.
universal appeal. If you are a SaaS provider, if you are a city and regional magazine, if you are, I don't know, some other small kind of industry, that you've never gone away. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, these niche company magazines aren't doing well. And I'm like, I can name hundreds that are doing great
Yes.
because they're in a
Same.
small niche
Yeah.
that are killing it with great content. They have great events. They
Yeah.
do a wonderful newsletter that people rely on. They're fine.
Yeah.
So,
No,
yeah.
you're right. It's the ones who are really putting the work into it are
Yes.
doing fine. The people who
Yes.
want to sit back like years ago, oh, they'll subscribe to us. We don't really have to do anything. We don't really
We're
have
the
to
only
care if they're
magazine, we're the only
engaged.
magazine in this city for this city. And it's, yeah, but if you're not useful,
Yes.
if you don't have listings of things to do, or they're out of date, or all those little things that add up, people, and of course the internet's a huge, city and regionals are competing with the internet because so many
Right.
people can just go to their computer and go, what's going on this weekend?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to become more to that person when you're a city and regional. Yeah.
That's right. So now when you're marketing events, obviously they've got to be handled a lot differently than
Yeah.
products and services.
Yes.
And how much time do you need when you're promoting an event?
Ideally, I have done it in much shorter time frames. I'm handling a short time frame one right now. But
Oh dear.
ideally, if it's a small side conference, like maybe 100 to 300 people, I would like at least 6 months, but really a year would be great.
Mhm.
6 to 9 months can work if your concept's fully formed. Expos, if you're launching an initial expo that's never been done, that you're expecting at least 1,000
Yeah.
attendees, I would love 18 months to
Right.
really make sure, because there's so many moving parts and such a need to make sure those thousands of people show up.
Mm.
But 12 months can work. I'm doing
So 18 months out, are you starting promoting the conference, or is it 18 months you're getting a
Oh,
venue?
no, I'm talking about the whole cycle. So
Okay.
for marketing, I think because people are making decisions, unfortunately, and anybody out there who works on events is nodding right now, people are waiting until the last minute to register.
Yes. Yeah.
Early bird means nothing anymore.
No.
Some people want to save money, but apparently some don't care. They want the flexibility of, I may or may not make it. So I'm
Right.
going to register 4 weeks out when your F&B's already been turned in or whatever.
Which drives event organizers absolutely insane because
Well,
they're like sweating the people. It's like,
yes, it can be now for a huge like consumer event, like a festival or an
oh
outdoor
no,
expo that's
that's
maybe the convention center. That's walk in and the 2 weeks before. You just know how that is.
yeah,
But for
that's not
a business
our
event, a
yeah.
business event is you have to know they're coming so that your sponsors are happy, that you're making your revenue. And so, yeah, it's very nerve-wracking. And the hotels and venues haven't caught up to this concept. They're still asking for F&B and room blocks to close 6 weeks beforehand. And you're like, I'm going to get another 100 people once those are closed. And I'm going to have to come back to you and say, I need more rooms. Or so I don't know what the answer is with those guys because they're just not catching up. But
Yeah.
for the marketing piece, most people I work with, and in my own experience as an employee, we almost always started right around the 6-month mark for a
Yeah.
business event. Um,
I do see like large trade shows when you're there at that show. And of course, this isn't the marketing, but they already know, okay, we're going to be in the next
Yes.
year, we'll be in Orlando, or they like to make that announcement at the
Yes.
show, which makes sense. If you've got this large show, it's 30,000 people, you want them to leave knowing where next year is going to be.
Exactly. That's it. You should always try to have that information available and have collateral printed up and ready and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But I find the 6-month mark is about right.
Okay.
That hasn't seemed to have changed that much. I have seen marketing change for webinars. Even just a couple years ago, we were promoting webinars like 2 months beforehand. And now I'm seeing 3-week cycles.
Wow.
3 to
Wow.
4 weeks where they're like, this webinar is going to be on April 9th. We're going to have a first announcement 3 weeks before. We're going to do, and it's happening next week. And then we're going to do it's tomorrow.
Mm,
And they're getting their numbers. So I
good.
think it really speaks to that mindset that a lot of people have now of, I'll see if I can make it.
Yeah. What about the smaller events? Say you're a company and you decide you're going to put on an event for our customers for value added. How far out would you be on something like that? Or do you have a customer that does something like that?
Say that one more time for me so I can understand what you mean.
Say you're a company and you decide you want to put on an event, you're inviting really all your customers. If they want to push it out to other people, that's fine, but it's predominantly for your customers.
Yeah.
And then you'll have other sponsors there to be value added, and good speakers will come in.
I think it's the same timeline as a regular.
So 6 months out, you should start marketing it so they put it on the schedule,
Yeah, I mean,
which makes sense.
yeah, and obviously before that, your timeline's still really around 9 months to a year because you want to make sure that you've got your venue locked in,
Mhm.
you've got the correct date and timing, you've got sponsors lined up well before you're even marketing it. Even if it's not all your sponsors, it should be a big chunk of them,
Mhm.
because they'll help you market as well. But 6 months seems to be about right, just so that people can plan. If you're trying to launch an event in the fall and you're not starting to market it until February, that can be difficult because sometimes their budgets are already set for the. So
Yes.
you have to look at your timing and go, gosh, we'd really love to do a
Where
fall
are you in the
event.
year? Yeah, where you
Let's
fall in
start
the year
talking to
schedule.
people the previous fall. Maybe you start making announcements out to clients then of,
Yeah.
please put us in your budget. We're excited to see you. That's an exception to the rule, really, but it's all about looking at your timing and just saying, I know when my clients do their budgets, I got to make sure they know about this now.
Yeah, I know I did that. I think it was heading in before New Year's. It was in December, and I sat down going, all right, in 2024, which shows would I like to go to? When are they? Because sometimes the shows also overlap. So you have to decide, okay, which one am I going to go to?
Yeah.
And then last year, I was ridiculous. I did 4 trade shows within, it was like less than 3.5 weeks. So it was like, I didn't have enough time to implement or handle anyone I talked to at the first show before I was off to the second show, and it just got crazy. So I was like, no way, I'm not doing that again. And you have to sit down and look at your schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. And that speaks back to the point of there's a lot of shows going on.
Yeah.
And
there
you
are.
making that decision is what all your attendees are doing.
Yeah.
And,
That's right.
and what your sponsors are doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. It goes back to think about, even when you're looking at a marketing piece, think about what you would respond to on a marketing
Yes.
piece. And that's what you should put into that messaging. So
Yeah.
Kristi, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really found
Yes.
this information to be so helpful. I love events. Like you
I do
said, I
too.
think so much can happen at an event. And I think it can help complement all the other marketing things you're doing, including any virtual events you're doing. So I thank you.
Yes. Yes, I thank you too. I'm really pleased to be here. And if you have any more questions, let me know.
I sure will. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the World Innovators B2B Marketing Excellence podcast. If you'd like to be updated when new episodes come out, don't forget to subscribe. Also, check out our social media accounts to stay up to date on B2B marketing trends.